Greetings and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks so much for joining us for our program today titled Changing the Odds, The Hill's Cancer Summit. We've got a spectacular lineup of speakers joining us today from the front lines of the fight against cancer. Throughout the afternoon, we're going to explore how, amid the unprecedented disruptions of the pandemic, they're continuing to research, diagnose, treat, and prevent cancers with the ultimate goal of finding a cure for a disease that impacts far too many of us. Before we begin, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Illumina, for its support of today's conversations. This event comes during a special anniversary. 2021 marks 50 years since the passing of the National Cancer Act, first signed into law by President Richard Nixon in 1971. The landmark legislation was part of what he described as the war on cancer, and it established and mobilized many federal healthcare bodies as we know them today, including the National Cancer Institute, and we're about to talk to the director there, the President's Cancer Panel, and the National Cancer Advisory Board. We're going to have people from all of those folks. We're honored to have current leaders from all of these groups joining us, and this afternoon we're going to examine many of these issues that these institutes have been dealing with over those 5 decades on the road to beating cancer. It's no secret that cancer is one of the leading causes of death worldwide. In the United States alone, about 1.8 million people were diagnosed with some form of cancer last year. But a closer look at recent data may offer hope. Since peaking in the early 90s, overall cancer death rates have declined each year, and the number of cancer survivors is expected to grow by more than 30% by 2030. One of the questions I'm going to ask is, should we be satisfied with those numbers? Are those incremental numbers? Should we be doing things with technology that we brought online that can help create strategic leaps? We're going to break into these questions. What breakthroughs in cancer research, screenings, diagnosis, and treatment are making these outcomes possible? With President Biden's mission to end cancer as we know it, what are the federal health agency's top priorities for improving cancer care? And what are key stakeholders doing to eliminate disparities and make the healthcare ecosystem really work for everyone? We're going to be putting these questions and many more in front of our fantastic lineup of speakers. But first, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events, all one word, at The Hill Events, using the hashtag #TheHillCureCancer. We're broadcasting live, and we're going to take your questions throughout the program. As with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video, and I'm told if you just push refresh on the page, everything will be fixed. Hardly works for me, but I'm very hopeful it works for you. My first guest has said that we're living in the golden age of cancer research. Here to discuss what brought us to this point and what that means for the future of cancer is the director of the National Cancer Institute, Dr. Ned Sharpless. Dr. Sharpless, it's great to see you. Let me just start this off with a big question. We're 50 years since the National Cancer Act was passed. And I guess the thing I'd go back to is what I just asked. What are some of the massive gains, the real accomplishments that you feel we've made in the last 5 decades? And what should if we level set today and we see what technologies are possible, what could come on, how do we look at the next couple of decades? Let's not go 5 decades out, let's go 2 decades out and say what's on the horizon that we who are patients and part of the policy community ought to be targeting as our horizon.
Yeah, I think you framed it exactly right. I mean, the National Cancer Act of 1971 was in many ways visionary. It created this infrastructure and these research capabilities and national databases of statistics and clinical trials networks and just many things that provided the backbone for cancer progress that we've seen over the last 5 decades. But I think it's also important to admit that at that time it was naive. It thought, we were going to cure cancer in like 5 or 10 years and we'd be done with this. That was sort of based on the experience that we'd had with antibiotics. They'd been so successful and rolled out so rapidly for sepsis and infectious disease that I think many people figured cancer was going to be similar. And, that showed really that we didn't understand cancer biology back then. Cancer turned out to be a much more difficult problem than anyone imagined. But what's now happened over the last 5 decades is we have made immense progress in cancer, and this is belied by decreasing cancer mortality, by really improved survival for certain kinds of cancer, new FDA-approved agents continuously coming out, this rapid pace. And so, as you said, I think we'll view this period, this remarkably productive period, as a golden age of cancer research. But I don't think anyone should be satisfied with the status today. We still have 600,000 Americans dying from cancer every year in the United States. Cancer is becoming a very important cause of global mortality, and so it's a burden on the entire world's population. And so I think it's a good time to be commemorating this anniversary and talking about what we can do in the next few decades to really meet the president's goal of ending cancer as we know it.
Look, I traveled with then Vice President Biden twice to Davos, where he unveiled and talked about the first year when he unveiled the cancer moonshot. The next year he went right before leaving his official position, and I guess, I'm going to probably be, crudely define what he was trying to do. He said, look, there may be things that we have to rethink, or there may be silos we need to break out of. We may need to bring people from different parts of kind of the tech spectrum, maybe information sciences. I remember Bill McDonough of SAP there and others to say maybe we need to kind of throw some folks together that have thought about this question, but not together. I'd just like to get a snapshot from you because his critique was implicitly the way we were doing cancer research wasn't moving efficaciously or fast enough. Where are we on the cancer moonshot, and has there been any progress in breaking down some of those silos?
Yes, we're now 5 years into the cancer moonshot of a 7-year initiative, and it's a good time to be talking about what the moonshot has done and what comes next. I think that then Vice President Biden spoke very passionately about the issue of data silos, that there was information about patients in separate places that would be useful if all put together and shared in some way in terms of making progress for our patients, but which was challenging because of the sort of structure of science. And we worked very hard to address that. So, for example, an important initiative is the Childhood Cancer Data Initiative, where we're trying to get all these different pieces of data together and share them and aggregate them in a common way so that we can learn from every child with cancer in the United States and really make progress for our patients. I think one thing that we've really seen in cancer research is that the progress and the opportunities for scientific advancement are such in our field now that we have just an influx of disparate, talented individuals coming into cancer research with various backgrounds, mathematics and physics and computer science, and all of these people are moving into cancer research because they see it's an area where this progress that we spoke about is possible and can be further accelerated. So an actual challenge for the National Cancer Institute is to vet all these great ideas and to figure out which are the most meritorious for support and funding. So in a way, it's a good problem to have. We have all these people who have great ideas of how to solve cancer coming to our field. But it's a reason why we need robust support for the cancer research enterprise, because supporting all these great scientific concepts is challenging. The things that Moonshot has tried to address is to bring in some new funding for cancer research for new ideas, as you described. The then Vice President Biden very much supported.
Well, look, one of the things that I find perplexing about the time we're living in is that you can read about AI, you can read about big data, you can read about, within that. I was talking to Dr. David Agus the other day, and he was sharing with me that there, in this data are gems that we will find in our search in cancer and many other issues. He said, it's interesting, the elephant, he told this to President Biden, that, elephants don't get cancer. And if you look at their genetic code, they're like, I'm not a geneticist, but there are 20 genes or something in there that elephants have that we don't have, and or we have one, according to David. And I'm just interested in the application of technology, at very advanced level. And you've written about this recently, about what AI can do. And I guess to go back to my original question, which was incrementalism versus strategic leaps. Are strategic leaps possible given all of these new methodologies that we're bringing into the field?
Yeah, I think first of all, technology is very exciting in cancer research. So we have, innovations in next generation sequencing that might be useful for diagnosing cancer at very early stages. We have new kinds of cool imaging that might be very, very valuable for predicting cancer outcomes, for example. So we have a variety of these technologies. AI in particular is exciting, but it's important to say AI is not like a thing in the future for cancer research. It's here now. So we already have many FDA cleared devices that are being used as cancer diagnostics, and it's being routinely used by cancer researchers to analyze large, complex data sets. So it's already changing the research and clinical care of patients with cancer on the ground today. But the opportunities for further discovery with artificial intelligence and related technologies is very, very significant. Something about cancer, you asked this question about incremental versus strategic process. A fact about cancer, in some ways maybe one of the most important really discoveries about cancer in the last few decades, is that cancer is really heterogeneous. There are like thousands of different kinds of cancers. There's not one kind of lung cancer. There's not one kind of breast cancer. And so to make progress against cancer, you have to really simultaneously make progress against many, many diseases. So in a way, that progress feels incremental. We have a new cure for a very rare cancer. It slightly decreases mortality. It looks like incremental progress. But what we've done is add all of those small gains up to turn into giant progress for our patients. And now is the time, given this new understanding of cancer, all this new technology, to really press that advantage and to end cancer as we know it.
Now, let me ask you this question we have from the audience, and I know that you've spoken before about progress in cancer, and that it's not just curing cancer, beating cancer, it's also figuring out how you treat it, how you make it survivable, if you will. And I think these are swimming along. But Jody McKesson, who's Director of Clinical and Operations Analytics, asks, how is the current administration considering the financial toxicity associated with cost of treating cancer in today's environment? What associated strategies are being considered to curb the cost of delivering cancer therapy? I'd love your insights into that. I know that's not really your job, but I know that you kind of look at the broad ecosystem, which I think is the cost picture is part of this.
Yeah, certainly. We're very worried about this. I think the first thing you should say is no patient should be forced to make a choice between an effective therapy for their cancer and their rent. In American society, we believe we can do both. We can provide great care to our patients, regardless of race, ethnicity, wealth, access, these things that cause disparities in outcomes. We believe those can be addressed while simultaneously allowing people to live their lives and not pit these problems against one another. Cancer care in the United States is very expensive, particularly for certain kinds of cancer. And this is driven by many things, by the hospital care, by surgery, radiation oncology, multimodality treatment, drug prices. All of these things conspire, and often people miss work and maybe even have to lose a job over cancer care, for example. So these things all together create financial toxicity for our patients. The NCI's role in this is to really understand this, understand why patients are developing these financial hardships. What are the drivers of this? And are there things that we can do to make this less likely to happen? But certainly, it's an important question how we can balance this really exciting science and this rapid progress, but that leads to new devices and drugs and therapies and treatments that are quite expensive. And so then how we make those advances accessible to the entire community, so that everyone can benefit from these advances is really important question.
Yeah.
When the president says, end cancer as we know it, I don't think he was talking about. I believe we want to make progress for all Americans with cancer and in cancer, for the entire burden on our society. And that means even these individuals with reduced access to care and exactly the people who are at most risk for financial toxicity. So it's something as a society we really have to take on and address and do better.
Right. Dr. Sharpless, I'd like to squeeze in something super fast. I don't want to get behind, but I have this great chart that shows a decade of advances in cancer medicines. In 2010, the first therapeutic medicine. 2013, first antibody drug conjugate. Some things, words in here I'm not very versatile in, so I'll not jump them. But then 2017, first CAR T cell therapy and tissue agnostic therapy, et cetera. I'm just interested, if you were to jump ahead and say, okay, in 2023 and 2025, what would be the other things we might be seeing on this chart?
Yeah, no, that gives you just a very snapshot of the pace. It's tremendous. Right. And for example, my father died of metastatic melanoma in 2010, really the year before the immunotherapies that now largely cure that disease in most patients became available. And so that problem today would be very different from what it was, a decade ago. So the progress is fast and furious. One thing we have to do we have so many of these effective new therapies. We have to learn how to use them together and combine them and sequence them properly. I often say that even if we had no new advances in terms of therapies and diagnostics and devices, we'd still make a lot of progress against cancer for the next decade or so just by figuring out how to combine these agents and use them together in different ways. But we don't plan on that happening. We plan on there being major scientific advances against this backdrop of very rapid progress. And it's as I there is no single silver bullet. We don't expect one thing to really treat all cancers, but rather what you described of an antibody therapy for this cancer and a kinase inhibitor for this cancer, and maybe some CAR T cells over here. Maybe we'll have the ability to diagnose cancer much earlier using these very exciting multi-cancer early detection tests, which is the ability to find cancer on a blood specimen from a patient who's otherwise healthy at a very early stage when it would presumably be curable. So, I think a lot of these different things will combine to reduce cancer mortality incidence. We still have to work on things like screening. We have to make sure everybody gets access to mammography and pap smears and lung cancer CTs. And the pandemic caused some big problems there that we should talk about. But and also, something like tobacco control, where we've made a lot of progress against lung cancer by limiting tobacco consumption. But that's still an area where we can do more. So the things that we know work, we need to continue to do. But we also have these very exciting new initiatives that you discussed.
Well, Dr. Ned Sharpless, Director of the National Cancer Institute, I have about 45 minutes, maybe an hour of more questions. I hope you'll come back. I think this is so important, and I have really enjoyed your tweets. They've been very moving about, the impact of cancer across communities, the high death rate in the Hispanic community. There's so many other dimensions to this we didn't get to. I hope you'll come back and let us explore those with you sometimes. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to a great lineup of terrific speakers later on.
Thank you very much.